Hello, and welcome to the On Growth podcast. I'm Josh Ledgard, and I'm one of the founders at KickoffLabs. Today's guest had a job until the pandemic hit in the spring. He found himself at home with a small child and a lot of free time. Now, he's raised over $2.5 million on his Kickstarter campaign for Fort, the magnetic pillow fort, and there are still 19 days remaining. Conor Lewis has an inspirational story, and this interview is filled with tactical steps that took him from losing his job to launching a successful Kickstarter. Enjoy the show. So Conor, you must feel pretty good right now. So tell me what's going on with you.
Well, I am on basically day 4 of a monster crowdfund raise, basically, for probably the oddest product I could ever think of to raise millions of dollars. So I'm the founder of Fort, which is a magnetic pillow fort. And basically it's a set of, if I dumb it down really simply, it's a set of these really basic cushions with this really durable fabric, and we've worked magnets into all these different places and created this tower that can disassemble and reassemble in all these various ways that kids can enjoy. And we're at just under 2.4 million as I'm speaking right now on day 4.
Wow, that's amazing. It says I'm looking at the campaign right now, and it says 26 days to go, 7,858 backers as of this moment, and
right.
2,394,952 pledged for the project. And to add to your description about the product, the cushions with the magnets, I will say when I first saw you guys creating the campaign on Kickoff Labs to collect email addresses, I thought to myself as a parent of 2 children, I said, that is awesome, because anybody who's a parent knows, at least in my house, like if you have couch cushions or any sort of cushions and blankets around, they're almost never where you intend them to be as a parent. They're almost always stacked in some sort of like fort-like shape or
Yes.
some sort of building or wall or something to play with. And that is what the couch cushions are for. They are not for sitting on the couch.
And I don't even think I realized how universal that was until I started reaching out to people on Facebook and other, mostly mothers, but fathers as well. It is weirdly universal that kids are going to rip the couch cushions off and take the nice throw blanket and like construct something. So I just basically made a more expensive version of that.
Yeah, and I also had the conversation with Scott, my co-founder, the other day when we saw your official Kickstarter launch, and we were talking about it, and he's like, oh, can we get our own discount too? It's like he's like, I want it for my kids. I'm like, I'll talk to him about it.
Yeah,
I think it's pretty universal. It looks really cool. So let's go back a little bit. So tell me about you and your background. So Are you an engineer? Are you somebody who designs these types of things for a living anyway? How did you get to where you are now?
Yeah, so I'm definitely a Swiss Army knife of creativity, basically. And that's great and terrible at the same time. I started out basically in high school with creative projects, learning Photoshop and video production. Moved to college and was a very, very poor college student until I found out that there was an art school in college where I got to study painting and sculpture and mostly graphic design because I had kind of a love of computers. So I kind of worked my way from there, worked my way into corporate advertising and marketing. And at the time in April 2020, I was working for basically like a high net worth individual in his what they call like a family office. He invests in real estate and all sorts of other things. His day job was a lawyer, and I worked on a team doing all sorts of crazy, interesting, creative projects. And obviously, we all know what happened in spring 2020. COVID hit, and the creative, fun young guys who make videos and do social media projects are usually the first to go. So it was a great job, and it taught me a ton about business. But I was kind of looking at my life, realizing I had just lost my job. My wife was pregnant with our second child, and I had a great job. So, we weren't necessarily struggling financially as many across the country were at that time. But, I had a limited runway, shall we say, of time to know that I needed to find another job. The market was not great. And I was basically a stay-at-home dad. So when you're a stay-at-home dad, the couch cushions get thrown off a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm at home with my kids or with my 2-year-old and my pregnant wife. And in my Evernote on my phone, where I jot down all my notes, is a magnetic pillow fort. Literally written magnetic pillow fort, which is basically the subhead on my Kickstarter campaign right now, almost
Mm-hmm.
word for word. And it just struck me that what if I put like a magnetic connector around the side of like a big block cushion? What would happen? And all this was happening right with this craze of all these mothers and fathers staying home, being trapped with their kids, and this thing called the Nugget couch, which is basically became like buying Air Jordans, hard to get and limited. And so I saw this Nugget couch and I was like, okay, that's really cool. It's like play furniture. And I was like, what if I kind of took that a few steps further, made something just for playing, just something that my daughter could like run around and knock down, because I remember knocking down forts was half the fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I made this very odd transition all the way from kind of like artist and corporate like advertising to entrepreneur and kind of took it from there, basically.
So your background is much more on the marketing side of things. So I heard you say you were creating some videos. I heard you say you were doing like social media campaigns for this individual you'd been working for. Can you tell me, what did your V1 of the product look like? Like, how did you go about like designing, constructing, sort of building sort of a test version of the product? Because obviously it seems to exist. And so like, how did you do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really credit art school in a very interesting way with teaching me how to make things. So when you kind of come up through the creative lines like that, if you start in art school, you get a strong foundation in like kind of an analytical thinking differently. So that helps with the problem solving. But then you also learn quite literally construction, right? We studied welding and sculpture. We studied 3D design on computers. And then, working my way through all of these marketing things, it basically taught me how to problem solve very quickly. So, when I had the idea, I was already trained enough to be able to draw, right? So went straight to a sketchbook, started sketching out ideas based on shapes and things like that. And I had worked, when I was working for this individual, I had actually done a documentary film. I directed a film that went to film festivals. So I learned how to project manage on kind of a bigger scale underneath someone who was kind of the head honcho. And so I basically took those same principles that I learned from him. And, I was like, okay, here's my sketches. So now I need a product designer, and found freelance product designers. Okay, so
where did you find the freelance product designer?
That was, for better or worse, I went to Upwork. There's Upwork and Fiverr and a few freelance networks. I knew I wanted someone good, and I knew I had a very limited budget, right? So I had a few $1,000s. I probably haven't put more than 10 or 20 of my personal money into this project to get it going. So it's completely bootstrapped, which I'm super proud of. So yeah, I went to Uplands and I found someone who, you get a lot of international people. I found someone who spoke English really well. I found someone whose portfolio really jived with mine. We kind of interviewed. I saw what he did. I talked to a bunch of people. I said, what's your experience with kids products? What is your experience with furniture? What is your experience with technical drawings, and all of these things? And ultimately made the hire. And then it's really just a process of sending. I had a leg up, right? I could draw. So I was able to send a lot of sketches and work with him on that, and gave me a huge leg up. And within almost a month, we had almost exactly what you see.
Mm-hmm. And so the actual construction of it, were you running to the hardware store and buying like foam and your own magnets and sort of the nylon, like the fabric, and like putting it around together yourself? Like, how did that? I'm ignorant to this, so I'm just kind of curious about the whole process.
So, what was interesting was that was where I hit my first kind of roadblock. I had never sewn before. I knew that I kind of didn't want to do that. Going into this, being kind of like a techie guy, loving entrepreneurship and startups and listening, like Tim Ferriss podcasts and everything, right? You kind of pick up some things. I was like, I know I want to outsource this. I know that I can't really afford to sit and do this. Honestly, I don't have the time. I have to make money, quite literally, to pay for my child's daycare. That'll kind of light a fire under your butt at a certain point. And so I went straight to how do I make something overseas? How do I make something in Mexico? How do I make something in the US? And basically started cold emailing and using all the various websites, Alibaba and AliExpress and Made in Mexico and India Mart, and started reaching out to factories. I would find people who made foam products. I would look through all their photos and look to see if like the logos matched in the photo of the factory to the logo on the website, and just try and pick up all these little tips about how to find somebody reputable. And so after about 40 factories, I connected with one or two and was able to kind of get quotes on this product. And after that, you kind of have to take the leap of faith and say, will you be willing to make a sample of this? Which is one of the scariest parts, because you don't know, like this is a new product. What if they steal this? You also don't know, can they actually do this? Or are they subcontracting out from another factory and just upcharging you? So there's some resources online. Something I would definitely suggest to people who want to get into product like this. You can find affordable people to consult on this. I went through a program called Sourcify. It was pretty good for the most part. It taught me what I needed to know, how to source products. But I definitely recommend reaching out to somebody, even for $100, to pay like a consultant, somebody who even may be like a Chinese national or an Indian national or from Vietnam, or for example, you can pay them and have them kind of walk you through the process or how to find a factory. It's not too impossible to find.
So you went straight from sort of like the sketched notebook and the designs that you'd been working with your designer, and you went straight to getting like some samples back from the factories at that point.
Yeah, so we basically took a 3D render from my designer. He hadn't even drafted technical specs yet. So, he starts basically, was working in CAD. So basically we had like a three-dimensional block set that was very similar to what I had. And I presented that to various factories and said, hey, here's the materials I want to use. Here's similar products that I know use these materials. And that kind of eliminated most of, you kind of got down pretty quickly. And also, hey, do you have certifications? What are the safety standards, right? This is a children's product in the United States. There's a lot of safety standards. Not only that, but I care about that as well. We were able to take that 3D render and kind of eliminate people, and then have him work up a technical spec pretty quickly.
Cool. And then what was that moment like for you when you got the sample back?
It was baffling and so frustrating in a weird way. It was almost incomprehensible to see the thing I had made. And the perfectionist in me is like, it was already like, this is terrible. No one's going to buy this. And with a little perspective, I realized I started taking it to people's houses. I would literally drop it off on somebody's porch across the street from me who had kids and see what would happen. The super frustrating part was I ran into my first of the biggest challenges that I had to deal with, which was this product is freaking huge. It's like monstrous. It arrived at my door in these 2 huge boxes from China, and it cost me thousands of dollars to ship. And I got this bill and I was like, oh no, I'm completely sunk. Like I can't afford to make this product. It's so expensive to ship. Mm-hmm. And when I took it out of the box, it was unbelievable. It was actually like incredibly well made. I was shocked that it arrived at my door how it should. And it made me feel a lot better once I took it to people's houses, and the parents were like, oh, they've been playing with it literally straight since you dropped it off here. So it was the weirdest experience to go through, kind of seeing it come in, dealing with the kind of business ramifications, and then seeing how the actual end customer may use it.
So I want to talk about both of those things a little bit. So I want to talk about the user testing. So you went and you, like you said, you literally just looked at your neighbors and said, "Can I drop this giant box off on your porch?" And you just let your kids, have at it. And you found most of them were probably, especially with lockdowns and COVID, were probably pretty receptive to something their kids could do inside the house.
Absolutely. I started with little boys, some friends of ours in our neighborhood. We live in a neighborhood in the city of St. Louis, and both 2 little boys who are both 4 years old. And I would leave it there for a few days at their house, and their parents would send me photos of just like absolute destruction. I mean, dive bombing the thing, building something and running into it and jumping off of it. And it was incredibly satisfying to see just the joy and the ease of use and the creativity that was coming out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So almost immediately user testing, it validated the product. I certainly had concerns about cost and price, but it was really hard to deny the fun the kids were having. And we certainly had things that we were looking at that we could improve immediately. For example, I undershot the strength of the magnets, which is kind of the key selling point.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out like magnets are not only very expensive, but very kind of hard to work with the sizes and strengths. And so we had to develop a custom magnet just to be able to sport basically the perfect strength, right? Because if you have too strong of a magnet, a kid's finger may get pinched, something like that.
Yep.
And obviously you don't want them to support weight because that would be super dangerous, but you want them to be able to hold your structure without falling down. And we found that we were holding it, but they could still be bumped and fall down. So that was like the first thing we reassessed. But really, I mean, the shapes and all of it, the kids just took to it immediately.
Cool. And so now tell me about the cost concern, because you got a sample product back. It costs you thousands of dollars to get the product back. And I can tell from the Kickstarter page, I mean, you've got kits you can get that start around $250, $270, $299. Obviously not thousands of dollars per one of these kits. So how do you overcome the price factor and the fear there?
Yeah, that was a huge and still is a huge challenge. So from a business perspective, the Kickstarter itself, if I can start there and work backwards, we were profitable from day one, which is amazing. Not many Kickstarters are able to do that with a huge. We launched with a 50% off discount, and we were profitable on day one. Part of that is the economy of scale, but we're on a super tight margin unless we can kind of continue to scale the Kickstarter up. So working all the way back to the beginning, I received that sample, and the sample itself was not super expensive to produce, but the shipping was like astronomical, and so that brings up a lot of issues, right? So as a marketing person, I'm thinking, how am I going to ship a unit to a reviewer or an influencer, right? That's going to be potentially hundreds of dollars. How am I going to get it to the end consumer? People want free 2-day shipping for free, right? And in the world of 2-day shipping, a small e-commerce business like mine, how am I going to work with the customer? What price am I going to be able to sell it at that I can actually make a profit on this, because it is so expensive to ship? And then the magnets themselves add about 25 to 35% of the cost of the product. So the product itself, if it was just foam, is much cheaper, but with the stronger magnets. So those were issues we ran into right away. So we immediately started talking to fulfillment centers and looking into, can we compress this? Can we ship this in separate boxes? And what prices can we charge? We wanted to be really unapologetic about, this company has to profit. We're not here to do the tech, let's scale and make something for free, basically. And we need to pay for daycare, first of all. Yeah. And I can't reiterate that enough, because that's actually true. And how can we profit on this and still make a really great product? What is that balance of pricing that we can walk?
Cool. So it sounds like it's a kind of a combination of both figuring out the economies of scale of like shipping, like doing the initial orders and everything for the product and the magnets. I saw that you guys offer a version without the magnets, which is obviously probably helps a little bit if the magnets are 25 to 35% of the cost. And then also just kind of working through the shipping logistics of how you're going to get it to people and figuring out what the right price needs to be.
Yeah, container shipping obviously is the cheapest. So bringing over containers, and then also obviously expanding hopefully to maybe a US, some sort of US assembly or factory. All of those things, you look into, but economies of scale, obviously.
Cool. So we spent a lot of time to getting to where you are today with the product. I want to talk about a product alone doesn't raise almost $2.4 million. I'm just watching it tick up as we do this. You must do that. You just leave it open, right? It just ticks up. And
yes, I mean, the first day it was going crazy. We can get there, but yeah, no, definitely.
So let's talk about the product itself. I mean, it's an amazing looking product. I imagine that the test went really well, like you said, dropping it off at friends' houses. But there's 7,859 people right now that have backed the product. That came from an audience that you built. So let's start at the beginning in terms of when you started to think about like building the audience for the product, and what were the first few things you did around audience building?
Yeah, so that actually goes right along with the kind of pricing and shipping concerns I had from the business perspective. Was this what I'm kind of referencing with those concerns was about in August of 2020. So I still hadn't launched publicly. I had built a brand, the sport logo that you see with the colors, and I hired a friend who was a really good designer and illustrator to help me with all that. And I was really researching the market, and what I learned was with this nugget couch craze that was happening online, where these nugget couches became in so high demand that moms would resell them for twice the price, or this Facebook group about the nugget had tens of thousands of members and was crazy active all day. So I kind of secretly snuck into these Facebook groups, kind of got to know who was in there and kind of what they were wanting, what they were frustrated with Nugget, who's kind of like who's the market leader. And then realizing that there's a lot of these Nugget knockoffs that were coming up, people basically making the same thing as Nugget, but making it a little bit easier to get a hold of, kind of capitalism at work there. Ultimately, Nugget will probably win that game. They're the strongest brand. But I was just kind of seeing all this and thinking my product probably fits into this. It's a little bit different, but I think these may be my first, Kevin Kelly, first 1,000 true fans, or first fans. And so what I did was, after kind of learning in Facebook groups, understanding those people, this is actually where Kickoff Labs comes in, is I built my landing page and I had some simple photos based off of my first sample. I think I may have even launched without the sample in my hands in the US. And I started running really simple Facebook ads targeted to parents who had kids of certain ages. And pretty quickly, I was getting emails from people wondering what this was and wondering if they could share it in a Facebook group. And basically, I had kind of found my audience just through simple Facebook ads and targeting. And actually, basically within almost 24 hours, I got 1,500 leads on Kickoff Labs because someone had shared it in this Nugget group. And I had kind of built off of the back of this other brand by kind of differentiating myself.
Okay, so I want to recap what you said, because it's a great step-by-step. So you had basically 0 email addresses collected.
Yes.
You start out and you say, hey, as part of market research, I'm going to embed myself into these groups of competitor groups, basically. So like the Nugget groups and the parent Facebook groups that we're talking about building or doing DIY, like similar things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you embed yourself in those groups to kind of do market research and then also kind of build a little bit of a reputation in those groups.
Actually, I tried to connect with people in those groups. And self-promotion in Facebook groups is, I almost just was a silent.
Okay, so you were lurking to do market research.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're lurking to do market research. That's a great clarification. And then you put up a Kickoff Labs landing page for the product. And what I'm looking at right now is the Kickoff Labs landing page, launch.getthefort.com. And I don't remember looking at it right when you guys launched it, but I imagine you kind of went with a very similar, simple design, right?
It is not that different from probably, I think about 30 days in, we kind of got to this version, which is very, very simple. But yes, it did not change much.
Yeah, I mean, literally, it takes up just one screen for anybody who's just listening to this on podcast, and we'll post the images of this stuff in the recap so people can see it. But just to describe your landing page. Very simply, you've got your bright, colorful logo. You've got your tagline, says magnets plus foam equals kid magic. And then you've got a call to action, which is sign up now to get the fort with a Kickstarter discount. And then just a checklist of like product benefits. Mm-hmm. Really simple. Magnets mean builds don't fall down easily, saves your couch cushions, don't need parent help, easily wipeable and stackable for storage. And then, you're kind of getting people with this bonus on the bottom. But that's literally the page. I think I just read through. And you're only asking for a first name and an email address. And I think that's important to call out the simplicity here, because a lot of people get overly stressed when they're marketing a product like this, and they'll feel the need to sort of take each of those bullet points you have before you've launched the product and just expand. And I have to explain the science that goes into the magnets, and create this whole section on the magnets. And I have to explain the problem in the couch cushions, and they have the whole section that goes into the couch cushions. But at this stage, you realize you didn't need that, you knew that, or you just said, I only have time for this, and so I'm just going to put up the really simple version?
That's a great question. I will say for this product specifically, customer education is super important, but I was giving what seemed to be the 4 main points that people wanted. And previously, instead of sign up now for the Kickstarter discount, it gave the actual offer I was offering. So at the time, it was sign up now or get on the list for 50% off when we launch, right? And then the call to action button after first name and email sign up is get the discount or get 50% off or I want 50% off, those kinds of things. So we kept it really, really simple. And the reason was after they go through this page, we send them, the email that Kickoff Labs does, and we try to get them almost immediately into our Facebook group, right? Because I knew that Facebook groups is where all of this built. And so I was able to convert, almost 15 to 20% of my email list into a Facebook group, which because I knew the Nugget group had so much power, and the Nugget company does not actually own or run that group. It's a fan account. So I knew I wanted my own, owned channel, and I wanted to be able to teach the customers there and kind of evangelize them and then have them go out further.
Yeah. And so that's one thing I noticed when you posted a tweet a couple of days ago, and I've been following along, when you said my pre-launch stats, and it says email list 78,000. Those are leads you mostly collected on Kickoff Labs, I imagine.
Yes.
And then you just talked about the Facebook group. So you converted about 13,000 of those people into a Facebook group by encouraging them in the email to join up, and the follow-ons, I imagine, from the initial email collection. And then 10,000 to an Instagram page. And then also you're collecting an SMS list. So people were giving you their phone numbers. How are you going about collecting that information as well?
Yeah, that was something I looked at doing through Kickoff Labs. I got really nervous about the compliance issues. And for anyone doing that, I highly recommend looking into compliance. It can get sticky. So we brought on SMS late. So when we had reached our first 1,000 email list members and first few hundred members in our Facebook group, we learned pretty quickly that specifically moms of young children, email is not super important to them. I'm not trying to overgeneralize, but a lot of the mothers may not be in the professional work field full time, so email isn't their lifeblood all the time.
Yep.
But their phone number may be. And so we got a lot of specifically mothers who were like, hey, can we get an option so we can get updated? So even if you just text us, hey, there's an email in your inbox.
Yep.
Because they're just so busy with kids and everything and life that we knew we wanted to offer that. We didn't offer it right away. We actually built that in January. So we started in early January, just before launch.
And so you just basically emailed the list and said, hey, if anybody wants to be notified via SMS, you can sign up here.
Yes, and we used PostScript for that. Really easy to use. We're using Klaviyo for email, and basically, blast the email list. And most of our conversions, of course, came through our Facebook group, right? The people who we've been nurturing and educating and becoming friends with. We said, hey, we've got an SMS option, sign up here, and made everything was compliant and super easy and breezy, and it worked out really well.
The takeaway I had from that when I read your tweet, and I think it's a really good best practice, is not to lean 100% into one communication channel when you're building an audience for several reasons. I think the benefit for you guys is it's harder to get locked out of one in particular. So if something happened with email domain, or just you're not able to reach out for whatever reason, you're not just tied to email. If Facebook says, for whatever reason, we're going to shut down your Facebook group, you don't just have the Facebook group audience. And then you also have people that you say hey, I want a more intimate connection. You get that SMS connection. So you've got multiple avenues and ways to connect people. From your perspective, that's beneficial. And from the consumer perspective, everybody has their preferences. I'm sure you have people that like only ever follow up on Instagram. I'm sure you have people that only ever follow up on, read the SMS messages and not the emails. There's a benefit to building more than just one audience, and the focus should be on building multiple channels to your audience.
I think that was something early on that I knew when I was studying the kind of the strategy behind all of these things. That was something I knew I wanted to focus on early on. I knew I would kind of work my way there, and I knew I continually wanted to own my own channels more. I knew email was our bedrock, and I went out from there. It is really interesting thinking about where your customer is and then how you can kind of transfer them to other places and where to move in how you're marketing, right? So we knew that Facebook groups were the most powerful. We started in Facebook groups to get them to email, which is where we knew we wanted to capture them. Mm-hmm. And then after Facebook groups, when we had felt that we kind of tapped that for the most part, people were getting tired of people using the viral sharing KickoffLabs links and, in their other Facebook groups. We were like, okay, it's time to move to Instagram for the channel. Let's continue to build that next channel. So it kind of kept going like that.
Did you do anything to encourage the viral sharing? Because KickoffLabs product obviously enables people to, once you've collected the email address, and in your case, I was brought to, at this point, a page that says, and I love this tagline for a sharing page, it says, getting discounts makes it easier when you tell your spouse. And then links to share the product on Facebook, Twitter, email with the copy link. So was that all you did to encourage the sharing? Did you do anything else to encourage people to share along the course of the campaign?
We did a few different strategies, some that worked, some that didn't. We always had the share link. We always had the leaderboard, the very simple leaderboard you offer, which is, the total number of entries, which at a certain point, people actually really enjoy seeing how many emails you have when they're rooting for you, the position that you are in. But, on the first page of our KickoffLabs landing page, we say Kickstarter backers are automatically entered to win a free fort. Mm-hmm. So I go into more depth. This is an updated, you're actually looking at an older or a newer thank you page that just goes to Kickstarter. So it's not quite the one we had. But basically I kind of outlined the details of we're going to give away 5 forts to the top 5 sharers, trying to incentivize people to kind of climb the leaderboard. We got a little bit of pushback about that sometimes, people saying, oh, this is like one of those kind of scammy, whatever. But for the most part, that didn't happen too much. And mm-hmm. people kind of enjoyed trying to share. And, we're going to try and offer, a giveaway to everyone who's shared with at least one email as well to incentivize people to share, which I think is also something you can do, especially if your leaderboard is unattainable, right? Our top 5 sharers, I've shared with quite literally over 500 or 1,000 other email addresses, which is unattainable for someone else coming in. But it really is a really powerful engine, and you just kind of keep educating people, and I think it's pretty simple for the most part.
So I want to just recap what I heard you say is, one, you weren't shy about showing the total entries of people that had signed up. And in fact, in your case, it feels like a benefit because it kind of gets people involved in the mission. Like they get excited, like, oh, because I shared there, now there's, 95,000, and because I shared, now the number's going up there. And I think that can be a powerful thing if you're creating a product that can get fans behind it to have a movement. That in and of itself is probably motivational. Then you were giving away a free fort to, you say, a few backers who share the most. So I was a little bit confused, and you've probably changed this a couple of times. You were going to give it away to the top people sharing, which, as you pointed out, most of those numbers are probably unattainable to the average person. And then you were also going to do a general drawing amongst people that had at least one share, so that you had something for anybody to possibly enter.
Yeah, so that was definitely a later addition. We wanted to, and we tested a few different giveaways, but when we were looking at almost, at a certain point, raising that email list was getting kind of fun, right? We crossed 50,000 in December, and it was, it's just a crazy number. And so what we did, especially when you get people complaining, there's no way that I could actually win a free one. We thought, what could we do to potentially make this, keep engagement? And really, when you look at the stats, and you know this better than I think less than 5% of our total list had actually shared. And is that about right? What is that stat normally?
It averages about 5 to 7% of people end up getting a successful verified share.
Yeah,
in a campaign, and that's a good number. It just you really are happy to get those kind of numbers for engagement.
And I'm guessing that, especially with I'm guessing that a lot of the times there are maybe a full another percent of your email list that had shared but not used a special link or something like that.
Yep.
And we've gotten those emails, of course, but we sent out the educational email with the walkthrough of how to do it and said, hey, we'd love to offer. It's a much smaller pool, right? I think it was only about 2,000 people had actually shared out of 60,000 people at that time. And so, we said that we were going to offer 1 or 2 units maybe to the top. There are 1 or 2 random people on the actually had verified shared list.
Yep.
It's just another way to engage and kind of maybe keep those emails flowing.
It's something we often recommend as a best practice is to think about the 2 different sides of your audience. One is people that you may have known or discovered through the process are really just influencers in the space. So if somebody's able to get, more than 5 other people, they probably have some sort of undue influence in the space, or maybe they run a local toy store. Maybe there's something you don't know. And we always find out that people end up discovering these people they didn't even know in local markets that were influencers, and building a stronger relationship with those set of people, but then making sure you don't forget about what's in it, what feels attainable to the average person. And to get that 5 to 6%, to get that number up a little bit, it's really beneficial to do what you did, which is to say, make something that feels attainable to the person who's not an influencer, who's just a mom, who's just not just a mom, but who's not in the industry, who can't get you 1,000 connections, but they might be able to get you 3 to 4 connections. And you want to be able to activate that person with some little bit of motivation. And so I think you did a great job realizing that and putting out the simpler promotion. And then B, the thing that you mentioned, which caught my ear, some people miss, is that you reinforced it through education. So it sounds like you were sending out through Klaviyo follow-up emails during the campaign to remind people to do it and educating them on how, why, and where they can share, correct?
I think education is the reason we raised 2.2 million in under 10 hours. I think if you're looking at kind of the middle American mother and father or family, like our target is, I think education is essential. There's so many questions they have. Parents of young children, you have children. I mean, I have young kids. It is so important. We educated them on how to use these technical things like a share link that they may not have done before. Yep. We educated them on magnets, on the product itself. A lot of this happened in the Facebook group. A ton happened over email. I got Loom, the screen sharing app, just to do screen shares. We literally did 3 or 4 walkthroughs on how to back a Kickstarter. I actually backed a Kickstarter. I got it. It was funny enough. This is kind of a funny story, but I made a Loom screen share for my Facebook group and email list to walk them through the process of how to back a Kickstarter, because I knew I was bringing new people who had never even heard of Kickstarter to Kickstarter. And so I backed this project, and on launch day, when we launched, I got the product I backed within 6 weeks. And I was like, that is a great omen for me shipping my Kickstarter on time. So I felt really good about that. But, I think that was just so essential for us. And actually the stat backs that up. I tweeted, I think this morning about, I think 65% to 75% of our backers had never even been on the platform before. So that is almost completely opposite of what most Kickstarters do, which means we've got a lot of room for organic growth. But that just tells you how much education we did up front.
Yeah, I think that part is critical. So to dig in a little bit more, so you talked about, you filmed videos, how to share, how to back Kickstarter, just every little thing. And so you don't assume that your customer knows everything you know, which is extremely important. How often were you reaching out to the list throughout this process? That's another question we get all the time, because people are scared. They say, oh, well, I don't want to send too many emails and scare them off of my list. And they're really paranoid about that. So can you kind of explain per each channel, how often you're reaching out in each of the channels that that we've talked about, the email, the SMS, the Facebook group, and the Instagram?
So I would say earlier on, months out, we would try to convert them very quickly to the Facebook group. So that would be 1 or 2 emails within the first week. And if they didn't quite go there, they would get basically one email a week from Klaviyo. And then if they were in the Facebook group, we were doing videos all the time, screen shares. I would just shoot an iPhone video answering a question personally about maybe a potential customer had a concern. So there was that point of contact there. I actually also did what I called a tour de fort. I had a plan to drive around the Midwest, where I'm based in St. Louis, and visit people outside in parks and have them drive by and show them the fort pieces. Most of it was canceled because we had some issues with shipping and obviously COVID challenges, but we did actually leave town to go do one of these, and it was very interesting to kind of do a boots on the ground thing. But we would basically send one email a week, and we started ramping that up about 6 weeks before with about 2 emails a week, starting to really try and push accessories, talk about colors, and kind of release new information to really get people excited. Of course, our unsubscribe rate went up, but, and I was torn all the time. But for the most part, I think if they're going to unsubscribe, they're going to unsubscribe. And I think with this audience, they were so hungry for information. You have to really know your audience, that they wanted more from us. And so we just kept giving them more, and we kind of found out who the true people were.
Yeah, I think that's important to realize that as a lesson for people is that, yeah, you're going to get unsubscribes, but if you had said nothing, and so the worst case scenario, and this happens sadly way too often, I see, is people will collect 10, 20,000 email addresses on Kickoff Labs. They won't be following up. And then when they launch, they'll say, hey, I didn't really make that much money off of the launch and the email list. And I'll ask them after the fact. I'll say, well, what emails did you send? They said, well, we sent them a thank you email for signing up, and then we sent them an email on launch day.
That's baffling. Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know what else to say, but that's a recipe for failure, because like I sign up for tons of stuff, and like if it's anything more than like a week later, like I'll have forgotten what I signed up for. And so when the email comes like 2 months later, I'll be like, what is this thing? I don't remember this. But if you're constantly top of mind, yeah, you might lose a few people, but the people who are interested in even potential buyers are probably just not, they might just delete the email. They might not read it, but they're not going to unsubscribe. And then they might read every third email or every fourth one that comes in. And then they're going to be, they say it takes, like, the classic thing is it takes 7 touches to make a fan or like get somebody to purchase. You've built up that series of touches, some of them personal, some of them less personal, depending on the channel, so that when you hit the launch button and said to your blast to everybody, it says we're live now, you had a bunch of people that were already activated and ready to take action on what you were doing. So I think we've now led up to the part where we mentioned earlier. So what was that launch day like for you? So you obviously pressed launch on all of these channels and said, it's live, like, go get it. Like, is it that simple? Like, how did it go, and what happened next?
It was, as you can imagine, it was absolutely insane. We had, because our email list scaled so much, we actually, our original discount offering was 50% off. When we hit 10,000 emails, we realized we actually would potentially lose thousands and thousands of dollars on 50% off. So we had to readjust really quickly and say, for the next part of the future, the discount we're offering now is 45% off. So we raised the price by $20. And so we had this very odd situation where we had 10,000 emails of our 1,000 true fans who were getting this for 50% off. And then weirdly, that move to 45% off spurred a crazy influx of people wanting to get the discount in case it moved up again. It's almost a scarcity thing. Yep. So on launch day, we were launching on Kickstarter to this 50% off crowd first, who we knew were our most rabid fans, and all that education and everything. Every email came from Conor at Fort. It didn't just come from Fort. Everything was super personalized, all the education. And so once I launched that 50% off, I had people who were in what we call the 45% off group, just waiting on Kickstarter, refreshing, trying to get the 50% off discount. So, it was bananas. Basically, we did hundreds of thousands of dollars within the first 30 minutes, something like $500,000. We knew our email list that those 10,000 people would potentially convert as high as 10%, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it ultimately converted higher than that. And then, we knew that the 70,000 other emails would convert almost the same, maybe just a little bit lower, more like 8%. And I think we did do that. And so we basically just got on our emails and on the Facebook comments and just rode that wave all day, typing until our fingers hurt, responding to people.
So when you say rode that wave and were responding to people, like, were you getting questions? Like, were people, what were you responding to during that day?
Yeah. So most of the questions we got were in relation to the discount tiers that we had offered. We had done a ton of education, but we still, even with all of our hard work, we still fell a little bit short. So we probably got 100, 150 emails that day, mostly from people who were familiar with Fort, who were in the Facebook group, who knew about us. And so we were just kind of dealing with that. The other ones were, hey, I don't know how to do this. It doesn't say, for example, it doesn't say purchase on here or checkout, right? If you're familiar with Kickstarter, you'd be like, oh, that's because it's called a reward and it's called a backing or a pledge. Yeah. And so we kind of had to do, and those were usually the people who obviously didn't watch my screen shares, which, you can't blame them. But so it was also customer stuff like that. And like I said, almost 75% of our audience had never even heard of Kickstarter before. So we really had to do day of, and I hired my best friend to do customer service for me. He's a former Apple employee, and he kind of knows all that crazy customer service stuff, having dealt with it. He built out this huge document, literally copy and paste. We also had to deal a lot with international and Canadians. Unfortunately, we weren't really able, with obviously our shipping challenges, to go there as well. So there was a lot of kind of fielding those questions. Hey, are you shipping to the UK? Hey, you're shipping to Australia? Those sorts of things.
That's got to make you feel good, though. I mean, you start with this idea and you've got a now worldwide audience of people that are interested in the product.
It is insane, especially when I'm looking at kind of the future and how to be competitive in the market. And this product's price is $3.99 at retail, and I feel very good about that. That's a product that we can sustainably build a business. But I'm certainly nervous. But knowing that people in Canada, we even have a few thousand people on our email list in Canada waiting, ready to buy. And I'm super excited to scale there because when I look at Nugget, which is definitely the market leader, I think Nugget is, in my mind, is Uber, right? They've got all this press, maybe a little bit of drama, and so if they're going to do that, we're going to be Lyft, right? So a little more fun, a little more pink, obviously, because pink is like our color, and so that's kind of what we're going for. Is how can we approach these customers that they haven't quite gotten to yet?
Cool. So, kind of gotten through my list of questions. I like to end this kind of round up our conversation to say, what haven't we talked about that you think is really important for somebody who's looking to do something similar? Maybe somebody who's got a physical product, who wants to start a Kickstarter campaign, who knows they need to build an audience. Like, what haven't we talked about, or what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think my story is an outlier in that there were things that coalesced to make this such a viral product. Mostly COVID, the Nugget craze. I was lucky to capitalize on that and kind of use that. Not everybody is going to have that, but there will be an audience somewhere. You have to find them and find how they work. And I see people too often going into where they found the audience, but not working with the audience. For example, the self-promotion in Facebook groups is not what you do. But what you can do is find out a way to target those people with ads and try to reach them, or reach out one-on-one. And that kind of thing is doing the marketing the right way and really personalizing it. I always put my name and my face in front of the brand, not too much so as to totally disassociate it as Conor instead of Fort, but that was really huge. And then I can't encourage people enough to really look at, the finances of things. Kickstarter is not, it's really fun to be kind of glamorous about it. But at the end of the day, if you're running a business, Kickstarter is a really challenging platform. You're offering a discount for something that you don't even have money to make in most cases. And so, we've had to be really cautious. And my goal is to be bootstrapped, and we are thus far. I have borrowed some money from family members that I've already accounted for paying back. But, I think really hard about those crowdfunding platforms. And there's a lot of really cool options out there, things that you can launch on Shopify. There's plugins that you could do a crowdfund on Shopify, shoot for different goals, things like that. I don't think $1 million raise is for everyone, having done it. It is really, really cool. And it's kind of that tagline, like, Oscar nominee, whatever, it's Conor Lewis raises $2 million in Kickstarter. But I really think, think about what is best for your business. And we knew we wanted the media attention. We knew we wanted to get as many units of these out as cheaply and efficiently as possible. And then hopefully people wouldn't balk at the price later on when we were offering them full price, and we could continue to scale that way. So
you reminded me of one follow-up question I had from earlier. So I've heard some people have given me numbers with Kickstarter projects, and they said, to raise whatever number you want to raise, expect to spend 20% of that number on advertising. So did you spend 20% of $2 million on advertising?
No. I think you're setting me up for this because you probably saw my tweets. I spent, it's on my desktop. I'm gonna verify this right now. Under $3,000 to get 80,000 leads. So it's a great example of, first, the virality of the product. The product sold itself in a lot of ways because of this nugget craze, the kids play furniture. It's a great example of the virality of sharing in the right market. Maybe board gamers aren't going to share like the moms who like play furniture, and then it's a great for KickoffLabs, right? Because your engine powered that, not to over promote you on your own podcast, but it certainly helped.
We are sponsored by KickoffLabs. So.
Yeah. So at this point, I just bought a year membership just because I was like, I think I'm probably going to use this again. We're looking at maybe using it again for a launch in May, kind of doing the same thing. I think there's something really powerful, maybe doing it a little bit differently. But yeah, we got really lucky in that, and not everybody will be that lucky, but there is a way to do it. And I didn't use growth hacking techniques. I didn't use sneaky PR. I just reached out to people, and the virality of the product mixed with the virality of the sharing and putting them into the right place, that Facebook group, educating them, and then moving them to Instagram. That's what kind of changed it.
Were you spending all of your time in one-on-one communications, or were you always responding publicly generally? Like if somebody would ask a question, you'd post the answer broadly on Facebook?
In the Facebook group, I was in there a lot until it got overwhelming. It kind of actually became my full-time job. And so I had to hire someone to help me manage that. So most of it was pretty public, posting and making videos for people. But of course, there was tons of emails. But for the most part, those questions that got emailed to me would come up in person. And what I would do is I'd make a video, I'd post it to our Facebook page, I'd post it to the Instagram page, things like that. Just helped a ton.
Yeah, no, you should absolutely do similar launch things. It's been pretty common and successful for people that have had a first launch like you guys to then say, okay, well, when we do the actual launch, we're going to do it this way. And then to do the regional launches as well. So we've had people have a lot of success saying like, get on the Canadian wait list for when this ships in Canada or when this ships in the UK. That's been fairly successul for people as well to do like a more regional approach of when you're launching in specific regions.
Okay, that's brilliant. Yeah, we're looking at May to do a kind of like a product release and maybe do like a limited edition, right? A run of 2,000 of forts in a special color that we'll only do one time.
Yeah.
And so maybe using a sort of sharing campaign or engagement campaign of some sort. Follow on Instagram and get on the list to get this product. A little bit of a scarcity, but real scarcity. We actually can make genuinely 2,000.
That's what fits in the container. So
it's at a certain point, it's also what you can afford. So there is that. But yeah, absolutely. That's very interesting. I think those are the things that I'm thinking are the big things that I learned. And I definitely want to encourage people to go for it. I think I'm really about like being realistic, but also like there is a healthy level of delusion that comes with this. Yeah. I've been joking with my wife. My story, like in local news in St. Louis, is basically like local man loses job, sells foam on internet. That's like that's my story, right? Or local dad loses job, sells foam on internet. So there's a healthy level of delusion to think I'm going to make a magnetic pillow fort and sell it on the internet. So
it's like every kid's dream when you ask your kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? A toy tester. And you're like, I now build toys.
Oh, you know what the sad thing about owning a toy company is you don't play with your own toy very much at all because you're always doing businessy things. It's terrible. All the kids have way more fun than me. But yeah, no, it's been really interesting. So I'm super grateful and really excited by everything, obviously. Now we're just in the slump of trying to figure out how to run those ads. We do have some cash set aside. We obviously didn't spend, what would it be, $200,000, 10% of $2 million. Yeah. That'd be 5 times as much as we even put into launching the company. We do have some cash set aside to help scale up Facebook ads for the Kickstarter. It is going to be a real grind. I won't lie. Most of our growth is the email list. So that's something that we're encountering right now is how do we scale through PR and Facebook ads? And that is my current very real challenge.
Yeah, I think it feels like you've had a lot of success getting real personal with your leads and your customers as you've started building the business and the audience. And I think you've got a really compelling story to tell. And so I think there's probably a good market for you to just get that story more broadly out of the St. Louis area and tell it more broadly. Hopefully we can be part of expanding that story and sharing it. And I would look at leaning into that if I were you guys, because I think it is a really, like you said, it's a viral product. It's one where there's a need either with or without the pandemic. I honestly think there's a problem space and a need.
Pandemic doesn't hurt. Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't hurt to have that as the extra motivation when you're looking around saying, what else can the kids play with today?
Absolutely.
Well, it's been a lot of fun. So thank you for spending the time. I'm glad we waited because it was great to see the success and kind of talk to you right while you're in the thick of it, having just launched the Kickstarter campaign.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. And I definitely learned a lot early on when I learned about Kickoff Labs. I shout out to Sheets and Giggles, Colin McIntosh. That's where I heard about you guys. And he has kind of become a buddy. And I listened to the On Growth podcast and read all the stuff. It was super helpful to learn that stuff. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing again. And have a great day.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to go try and figure this thing out. All right. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah, later, Conor.